Welcome to Wisdom Talk Radio, a collaborative community of explorers in conscious living. Welcome to today's episode of Wisdom Talk Radio. This is where we explore the depths of conscious living and what it means to live an expanded life. Join us each time to be inspired, encouraged, transformed, and to experience a deep sense of joy and possibility, and perhaps even purpose. Each moment of life is a series of choices and decisions. Which way to go? What do we do next? Is this the right thing to do or the wrong thing? What do I really want? When you know the power of your own connected consciousness, the experience of inner knowing changes really everything. It changes the way you live. What becomes possible then? I'm Laurie Seymour, host of Wisdom Talk Radio and CEO and founder of the Baca Institute, home of the Quantum Connection process. You can go over to the Baca Institute to discover your own quantum connection, meaning your unique connection with the essence of who you are by taking the Quantum Connection quiz. At least that's the first step. Why quantum connection? Well, we're each designed to connect directly with Source. We don't need intermediaries. And we're each designed to connect differently in our own unique way. And knowing your own style opens up a deeper connection really with the whole universe. It's the secret to creating what you truly want in your life. Because who you are is exactly who is needed. My guest today is Jeff Vander Clute, and he's just fair warning, he's coming to us from India or joining us from India. The connection, well, we're going to trust that it will flow. And not the connection between us, but the internet connection. So Jeff is an author, mentor, and coach from the future who supports individuals in awakening, healing, and reaching new heights in their life and work. Through practices of deep listening and what he calls sourcing, he enables people to see where their healed and awakened self is present right now, as well as to navigate complexity, lead with heart and wisdom, and build enlightened organizations that grow well-being for all. Welcome, Jeff, to Wisdom Talk Radio. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you, Laurie. Me too. And I love everything that you've said in the opening. It's so spot on.
Good. So we're in sync here. And I love the description of coach from the future. Long time ago, I used to call myself a futurist in ways that I would put myself out. I don't think I even knew what that was at the time, even though there was some inkling I had about that. What is that for you? What does that mean for you?
Well, first of all, let me say that it's a new phrase that dropped in over breakfast a month and a half ago, after a retreat in the UK. And I remembered a quote from William Gibson: "The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed." And I would add, yet. So the knowing that came with the phrase is pay attention, look for where the future is already present. And for me, what I'm looking for is what's already healed, what's already awake, what's already transformed to be in alignment with life. Because despite the news headlines, there is a lot of the future, the positive, healed, transformed future now. And when we see it, appreciate it, nurture it, play with it, have fun with the future that is now, it grows. It grows. And reliably so. And also, when we pay attention and appreciate the signals from life, what we will inevitably discover is that life is a great dance partner. Life is actually a great lead, and we
Mm,
can follow and be quite delighted with where it leads.
yeah.
So we don't have to figure everything out with our intellectual mind. In fact, it's increasingly obvious that the world has reached such hyper complexity, especially the human systems, that we've actually created an evolutionary crisis where we have to find new ways to operate that use, you could say, our whole mind, intuition, our deep capacities to listen and know, and use these in very practical, everyday ways. I like that too. And so, sourcing
Hmm.
is what I employ in order to tune in and access the deep wisdom and the knowing, not only of mind, I would actually say of the heart and the body, perhaps first, because
Hmm.
it's the intellect that has historically tended to get a little bit in the way. So it's nice when we can find alternative, very direct pathways to our own wisdom, because source is none other than deeply within us, and we are that, as many um, famous non-dual teachers have said.
Hmm.
Coming back to coaching from the future, it's not about, and I say this with great respect. I even say it with some reluctance, helping egos get what they want.
Uh-huh.
It's about working with the awakened one who is already here and helping this one to be more and more fully expressed. So with the awakeness, then comes the healing, comes the transformation, comes the alignment with life, and the beneficial impact that so many of us are deeply desiring.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for not continuing to, excuse me, to excavate, to dig up
Yeah.
what's old, what's not working. So
Yeah.
when you talk about sourcing, we both use that in I think some different ways, but ultimately meaning the same thing, which is going within, tuning into that wisdom which is inherent within us, our innate creative intelligence, and then being able to receive from that, receive the direction, receive the next decision, receive the, what is it that I need to do? And to me, that's far more than intuition.
Yes. Well, I would introduce some distinctions. So
Okay, good.
intuition is very broad, and, and I appreciate that there are many forms of intuition. When I say sourcing, I'm very specifically referring to going all the way to, let's say, the root of our being, the source of our being, not connecting through guides or ancestors or transpersonal, let's say, transpersonal consciousness, which is actually very important to work with. So I'm not dismissing it. I am saying, though, that we have the capacity to go to the root, and there are benefits in doing so. For instance, in addition to whatever guidance we may receive, again, from our own nature, in the Indian tradition, there's the Satguru, the true guru, and that can be understood as the inner guru, which you really, really are.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it's not an other. That's very important. Sourcing is not about
Mm.
connecting with something other, else, or outside of us. So the benefit that I wanted to bring in is every time we source, in addition to whatever helpful wisdom might come forth, we are bringing forth new energy and consciousness that is fundamentally healing. It is a creative act, in fact. To
Hmm.
source is to source creativity. And
Right.
and that brings forth regeneration, and I'll keep using the word healing. It
which
also
which I'm
is
never crazy about, by
profoundly
the way.
awakening, literally.
Yeah, I'm never crazy
Yeah.
about the word healing
Well,
because it
I see
keeps
that.
us stuck.
That's right. So it's good that I used it a few times and you could make that point. I see that healing really follows naturally from awakening.
Hmm.
And we may also find ourselves in situations where the body needs a little bit of assistance. And so it's a both. And interestingly, if we really go to the root of what healing is, and I've been writing a book called Root Meanings, which does precisely this, goes to the
Hmm.
root of what the words mean at the level of source understanding. Healing is a reorientation from unreality to reality.
Ooh.
So that's also awakening. So healing and
Ooh,
awakening
yes.
really are one when we go to the depth. So then any potential conflict gets resolved that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. And that's so clear, as you say it, it has that energy of deep clarity. And if you really think about it, if you really feel into it, there's so much there. And I want to ask you about, really about mind. Because people break us down into all sorts of different things. Well, there's just mind. There's just, and you're talking about, I know when you talk about the intellect and the way in which that's limited us really and led us perhaps astray in some situations, even beyond the heart or even beyond the whatever, there is that creative intelligence, it seems to me. And so when you're talking about sourcing, you're accessing that. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. I would be challenged to tease heart and mind apart. There are useful distinctions and there
Hmm.
are levels where the distinctions make sense and are helpful.
Hmm.
Profoundly, we can talk about supreme mind, in which all of creation is being, let's say, imagined. Uh, Imagination is a word that I prefer to dreaming, and dreaming seems almost derogatory. The
Yes.
supreme mind uh, is ultimately creative, and it's for the divine delight. So let's be clear that creativity is, uh, in some sense, where it's at,
Hmm.
and the mind has an important role. Absolutely important. Now, there are other levels of mind that are less realized, where we might say it's the little mind, the small mind, the ego mind, and the ego mind especially doesn't know what it is and spends most of its time and energy trying to defend what it thinks it is. And it just doesn't work that well. But we love it. We can't not love it. We have to love. And actually, that's the key. One of the keys is loving all that we see and encounter, even if it's confused, even if it's deluded, even if it's whatever. But anyway, so it is possible to live without the defendedness that defines ego. And the more we source, the more we discover empirically uh, who and what we are, and the more evidence we accumulate that we are, in fact, infinite,
Hmm.
and that life has our backs, and that ultimately we are life, and ultimately we are source, and we're just in the curious process of realizing that more and more. It's one thing to know cognitively, oh, yes, I am source. But that knowing needs to drop down into the
Hmm.
heart and into the full embodiment. Then we can relax profoundly. All the energy that goes, all the anxiety that arises from not knowing who we are, all that energy is available for,
Hmm.
guess what? Creative purposes. So now we're back
Creation.
to
Yeah.
divine delight and enjoyment. Yes.
Hmm. Hmm. My friend Jennifer Huff likes to call it creating upon creation.
Very nice.
Yeah. So when you talk about sourcing, can you give us a picture of that? What does that look like? How is that? Do you teach that? Do you help others to do that? I know you do. So what does that look like for you?
Yes. Well, it's helpful to be somewhat specific, maybe with the how of it.
Okay.
just to give people a sense that it isn't just some abstract thing and maybe you
Mhm.
can do it or maybe not. Um,
If you're
the
enlightened,
way
you
that
can do
sourcing, right, like that's a very limiting belief.
it.
So the way that it started for me, and I can tell the very brief version of the story, is I was thinking about physics. I had an insight into something that made a lot of sense at the time and still does, but we don't need to get into it. And I had a Kundalini activation. An energy shot up my spine all the way to the crown. I was literally lifted out of my chair and then danced around the room for quite a long time. So this was a novel experience, but I wasn't afraid. And I just allowed the energy to do what it did. I didn't know the word Kundalini. I had no context, but something in me wasn't afraid. As a result, you could say maybe some pathways were opened up, but I could feel subsequently when something was right. That initial
Yes.
knowing, oh yes,
Hmm.
these elementary particles can show up in different ways from the point of view of three-dimensional space, yet still be the same particle. It just looks like there's a multiplicity or a
Hmm.
multiplicity of types. Anyway, that was part of the insight into the relationship between oneness and manyness and how that actually can play out in physics. It turns
Hmm.
out some physicists are about exactly these things, I'm happy to say. So, yeah, subsequent to this activation, I realized I could reliably trust my body sensations to tell me when something was aligned, when something was a yes.
Hmm.
Now, I could have done so before, but because I wasn't listening and I didn't know, I sort of needed the spiritual hammer, to
Hmm.
knock me upside the head to get my attention. Um, and it did. Then it took a few more years because I didn't have a context and I didn't didn't know the first thing about sourcing or working with guidance before I came out of the closet, so to say. And I wrote a blog post called "The Signal," where I said, I have this curious sensation that tells me when something
Hmm.
is a yes. And once I shared with the world, then another important discovery happened, which is the more I share, the more I receive. So it's like, oh, the
Ah,
next level of capacity comes
yes.
in. Right. So not everyone needs to have the Kundalini experience to start sourcing. Um, Kundalini is great. What it actually is it's the infinite power coming into apparent finitude to get us to recognize our infinite nature. It can be a lot gentler if we just know that's what's wanting to happen and say yes to it. So, anyone, and we're all wired differently, fair enough, but anyone has one or more of the following clairs: claircognizance, clairsentience, clairvoyance, clairaudience. So those being this immediate knowing. Claircognizance is where ideas just kind of appear in your mind. You don't know from where. It's spontaneous. And I would say if something appears in your mind spontaneously and you're not trying to think it up, it could be coming from a deep place.
Hmm.
And if it's funny, if it's surprising, those are two more, I'd say, confirmations,
Hmm.
because that means we're definitely not contriving it. If it surprises us, it didn't come from, well, the level of the personality that might have been asking the question. Okay, so that's claircognizance and knowing. Then we have clairvoyance, which is a kind of seeing and intuitive sight, let's say. And people have written extensively about these things, so we're not going to need to
Right.
define everything. But clairaudience is hearing, and clairsentience is, I would say it's about feeling, the senses of the body, for instance.
It's the
Sentience can
sensory
also mean,
aspect.
yeah, sentience can also refer to knowing, but I don't mean that in this case.
Hmm.
So when I work with people, I ask, uh, how have you uh, received information intuitive, and I'll say intuitively at the beginning,
Hmm.
um, historically? Or can you think of times when an idea just came to you from out of nowhere, or you had a vision, or you heard a voice, or you felt something in your body? And is this a pattern? Is it something that occurs, from time to time, or maybe even frequently? And once we recognize, oh yes, that's there, and it's important, yeah, then we can really work with it. Some people we use a pendulum. Some people use their body as a pendulum. For instance, maybe a yes in answer to a question would be a spontaneous, again, spontaneous leaning forward, or maybe the
Hmm.
no would be a leaning backwards. I say a lot of maybes here because, again, everyone is wired uniquely.
Sure.
So there's a bit of an exploratory process to discover, which ways you are wired, and it's going to be more than one. And actually, the more we use our connection, the more ways we can connect. It's very
Right,
interesting.
right, right.
Um,
I know I find
and I know
that,
you know a lot about that.
well, I find that regularly, and that the more that I love what you said about the more that you share about, the more that you speak, the more that you show up with it, the more that you receive. I was wrote something the other day or sent something out about the more that we are willing to be seen, the more the more light we carry, the more that we have, the more light we have to live into, to live with, and to share. And there's something about that sense of recognizing what your own strengths are, what your own gifts are, what your own style is, and then allowing yourself to really realize that, to really know that, oh, that's what this sense of inner knowing is. And it's not arrogance, it's not ego, and to start to have the discernment between when ego is answering you and when it's this bigger knowing.
If there's a sense of relaxation and ease, it's not likely to be ego. Remember, ego
Right.
is defended. Uh, from ego's point of view, it's me against the world. That's exhausting. Uh, it's incredibly draining, and terrifying. So yeah, when we're in ease, we're automatically coming from a deeper place.
Yes.
Now, we can ask the question, uh, am I sourcing in the sense of actually going all the way, connecting all the way with the source of not just my being, but all being. And well, guess what? We can use our ways of knowing. We can use the system to refine the system. And that's exactly what I did. I would ask questions like, okay, how deep am I going? And I have a way of calibrating numerically, which is useful for me. Not everyone's numerical, but I'm numerically oriented. And I could get, oh yeah, well, this is deeper than yesterday, but I could go even deeper. And then I would set an intention, I would practice, I would meditate, I would invite, say, divine assistance from all the various levels to help me open up further. And then I would recalibrate. Oh, I'm deeper now. It seems like this is all the way in terms of the connection. Now, how do we know? We just try it out and keep working with it. And then the confirmations come. And then the doubt subsides. And then at some point, we're comfortable saying, oh, yes, this is from source. This is from, the true origin or seed point. And now the interesting thing about sourcing is I find it works really well for questions that can't be answered in other ways. So I don't, mm,
Go
let me
ahead.
give you an example.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily source whether the restaurant is going to be on the left side or the right side of the street. Google Maps will tell me that. Now, I might source it, um, but I find that somehow the way life works, the divine delights in all of these different ways of knowing and using all of these different ways of knowing. So I don't want to suggest that we throw out all the good fun we can have as we navigate the world with Google Maps or whatever it might be. Use Google Maps. Now, there'll be times when we can't get answers using any conventional means. And, frankly, it's more often than not. If we're asking interesting questions, then they're non-conventional, unconventional questions, and sourcing is very useful. And, if we're talking about going to the source and going so deep that actually every act of sourcing is a creative act, we're talking about bringing forth what is new, which means, as you said earlier, we can't rely on what is known. Excavation isn't going to help us. Conventional ways of knowing are not going to be very helpful. So sourcing actually becomes more and more and more important. And it is the central practice of my life. It is the experiment that the Jeff guy is running. Some people hate it when I say the Jeff guy. I'm not separating from Jeff. I'm just having a good time. And
And how
I
wonderful,
find it,
how wonderful to have a good time, because if we're not, it feels like we put ourselves into some kind of a box, and
yeah,
we've imposed certain kind of limitations. We can only live within this, we can only create within that. And you're talking about something that is really about living an expanded life full of
mm,
creation, which is by its nature fun.
yeah. Now, Jesus said the fullness of life. I like expanded life as well. There is something to this. If we're going to play the full keyboard of existence, we really need to bring in all of our capacities.
Mm,
And I if we don't include sourcing, we're missing a huge piece. Now, let's talk about practical decisions. So, because my mind just went there, and that tells
uh-huh,
me maybe it would be helpful. Um, I would say that an enlightened decision is where you could say the left brain and the right brain sort of agree, and other ways of knowing and synchronicities show up to confirm. Um, I would say in this case, let's go beyond the idea of left and right brain. Let's bring in sourcing. So when the sourcing and the intellect and maybe what other people say, if they're listening deeply, I'm not so interested in opinions and judgments, mind you.
right.
And there are synchronicities and the rainbow appears at the same moment that you're having the thought. Uh, okay, we're probably in the territory of an enlightened decision.
Yeah.
And what this speaks to is, again, the importance of all of our ways of knowing. So let's
Hmm.
use them. And then, by the way, we can do this together. So I talk about co-sourcing, and
Hmm.
actually quite a lot of people are talking about co-sourcing these days, which is appropriate given the word and the meaning, which is we do this together.
Okay.
And
I'm,
so
I'm
the
I'm
ways that
interested
I
in having you
source,
talk about that, because I talk about co-creation, and I think we're
aha.
talking about the same thing. So please go ahead.
Okay. Well, if sourcing is a creative act, as I have said,
Hmm.
then it is co-sourcing is co-creative, is co-creation. And okay, so when we're sourcing together, there are a few points I want to make, and then I want to talk about levels of sourcing capacity. Okay, so let's
Okay.
bookmark that. Hmm. So because I have my way of sourcing ways even, and you have your ways of sourcing, there may be information, wisdom that I access that is a little different or has a different flavor. And
Hmm.
so when we source together, not only can we check one another to make sure, that I'm clear and I'm not, um,
Hmm.
you know, perceiving in a distorted way or receiving in a distorted way. That's useful. But I'm focused more on the richness of
Yeah.
what is possible when we're listening together. It's like we have a bigger ear and we can hear more deeply into creation.
Hmm.
And there's a very physical demonstration of that called the Very Large Array in New Mexico, which has a whole bunch of ginormous radio telescopes that are spaced perhaps a kilometer apart. And then they're synchronized so that together they can listen billions of years into the universe, which is to say, listen back in time billions of years. And no single radio telescope would be able to do that, would not have that kind of
Hmm.
acuity. So co-sourcing gives us the ability to peer even more deeply into the creative processes and to co-create more powerfully. And this is the segue into levels of sourcing and co-sourcing. So we could say the first level, or maybe we could use the word stage, has to do with sort of like the training wheels. I have a question, I'd like an answer for something very practical in my life. Um, it's a great way to start, and it never ceases to be practical.
Hmm.
Sourcing never ceases to be practical. Now, after we have some confidence in our ability to ask and receive,
Hmm.
um, then what we will naturally start to discover is life flows when we live in this way. Things happen more effortlessly. Um, all the things that we thought we had to do on our to-do list, somehow many of them are just handled by life
Uh-huh.
because we've really come into alignment and into attunement with
Hmm.
the whole. And as the whole, which we are, whether we realize it or not, when we see a need, there are deep processes within creation that go into action, that spring um, into yeah, motion or whatever is required to bring about what is required. And it might not be that our personality needs to be very involved, but our role is to see the need and then life can do the rest. So that's one reason that sourcing is so empowering because it takes a lot off our plates.
It does.
Now, we also discover, given what I just shared, that we are creator and we are co-creating with the whole. And we could say we're co-creating with God, and I'm always going to say, and don't forget that we are that. Um, so the second stage or level is non-dual creativity, like recognizing that that's what's happening. In the oneness that is, we've kind of dropped into a place where what we see just tends to happen.
Mm.
And we can, through the process of making the deep connection and establishing ourselves in the deep connection of source and sourcing, um, we can recreate our lives and even recreate the human experience on the planet. Um, and it takes some practice, and there are additional levels, and it takes probably many of us practicing to recreate the whole human experience and regenerate the ecosphere. But that's what's trying to happen.
Mhm,
That's what
mhm.
is guaranteed to happen as we source. So,
Have you
yeah,
done
the
this much
non-dual.
much in teams? Because that's something that is very close to my heart, like how we create together. And when everybody is operating with this intention and from this place of their own connection, what can happen then? I mean, the innovations, the new creations. So I'm curious about how you're working with that or seeing that in terms of teams or organizations or.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I will say that for non-dual creativity to work, there needs to be an acute sensitivity to what is aligned with all of life. So if
Mm,
we're trying to create something that isn't in alignment, it's not going to work out that well. Humanity
mhm.
has been running that experiment for quite some time, and we're seeing the results.
Now you
And
said
there's a lot of
humanity,
great
right?
learning.
You said humanity has been running that. What I heard was vanity has been running that.
Very good. Yeah, and perhaps the rhyme is no accident. So, yeah, a humanity based on vanity doesn't work well and doesn't even achieve the goal of vainglory.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we have the capacity to source, some of the questions that we can ask are, is this aligned with life? So in a team setting, let's say in a corporation, and
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of this, and it's really fun. We
Mm-hmm.
can ask the question, is this strategy aligned? To what extent is
Mm-hmm.
this strategy aligned? That's where the quantitative sourcing is very useful. Oh, it's 98 out of 100 aligned. I find that if it's less than 100, there's going to be static somewhere. There's going to be dissonance and disruption somewhere. So let's keep going until we find the strategies that are 100 out of 100. All right.
And
Then,
okay, so
hmm,
let me just interrupt you for a second there because so in that process, and I'm right with you, in order to keep going, people tend to want to revert to their usual ways of doing business, and like trying to figure it out. And you are so much not talking about figuring things out. And I love that. I mean, I just adore it.
yeah.
So, right in that moment, how is it that you're navigating that?
Hmm. Well, if if an identified small mind wants to start calling the shots, then the resonance is going to drop.
Hmm.
And I would simply reflect, okay, well that suggestion is a 97 out of 100. Maybe I'll be even a little bit
See?
charitable. I'll never say what isn't true. I would only say what's true.
Hmm.
If it was a 63, I probably wouldn't even give the calibration. I would just say, that one's a little lower. And then I would gently steer the individual or the group back into the flow of yes. So really, this is about following the yes. If we follow the yes, we're going to get good business results. Now, this is a hypothesis that I'm still working to prove in a general way.
Mm-hmm.
Because while society is still unconscious, largely, not completely, um, it's not easy to have a conscious business doing things in very different ways successfully from the point of view of finance and key performance indicators. Like when you're really bringing the new, bridges are needed. So we do need to find the way to operate within the current paradigm while coming from the future and more over time coming from the future. Now, I will give an example from India, one of the first examples of sourcing in a corporation and getting a good result. And I won't name names, but one of the largest companies in India, based in Mumbai, invited myself and a couple of partners from Delhi to come down and run a one-day workshop with the entire executive team
Mm-hmm.
of a struggling subsidiary. And uh, the CEO was particularly interested in which advertising campaign to
Mm-hmm.
go with. And again, I can't get into specifics because then it would be easy to say
Right.
who it is. Um, the CEO had an idea. The marketing VP had a different idea, interestingly. So we went around the circle and asked people to give a numerical answer to how resonant or aligned
Oh,
each of those ideas was. And then I had a spreadsheet ready to go where I could do averages and standard
oh my goodness.
deviations and fun quantitative stuff
Woo.
that corporate types like.
You
And
are
the
you are
answer
a
was
numbers
very
guy.
clear. Yeah, I can operate in that world, but I have to also operate in the corporate setting, sort of on sources terms, or
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so the result was conclusive in favor of what the CEO was feeling, perhaps intuitively.
Mm-hmm.
And they went with that. And maybe they would have anyway, because the CEO might have just said, we're going to do it. But
Right.
he had some backup that he could use with his VP. And it turns out that their ad campaign won awards. And
Okay.
so that was an early success. And the company still exists. Now they were struggling. This was 9 years ago, and I
Mm.
noticed they still exist. So hopefully we were able to be helpful in a context which wasn't really about um, sourcing and intuition and spirituality.
No, but and it doesn't have to be. That's how you said this.
Right.
It's always practical. I mean, and that it's we don't
Mhm.
separate those things out. Like this is spiritual and this is practical. And I love that about my own learning of all of this was my teacher would always say, if the first of all, if the garbage man can't understand you, you're nowhere. And and that everything is connected. Everything is the same in a way. And in that, we have to go beyond our parsing of everything. So you said this is directly from you. You said that humans are now feeling the pressure to discover their innate genius beyond computation and reasoning, which includes intuition and cosmic consciousness.
You're here. Well,
Yeah.
we can also add AI to the list of catalysts.
Ah.
Um, because there is some fear, for instance, that artificial general intelligence will exceed human cognitive abilities in every way. And look, we're not computers. Our brains are not computers. We're not made out of silicon. It's
Mhm.
fine if computers can do certain things better
Mhm.
than humans. Um, I think about an education system based on rote learning and how antiquated that is. One day, the idea that we are kind of boxes with intellects is going to be equally antiquated. In fact, I would say that the arc of human evolution can be understood as a development from instinct to intellect, where we gain some capacity to see clearly and make better and better decisions. Fair enough. Left brain has its place. To intuition, Now, we don't leave instinct behind, we don't leave intellect
Right,
behind,
right.
but nor does the intellect sit in the driver's seat. As
Hmm.
Jonas Salk said, intuition will tell the thinking mind where to look. So let's learn to use our intuition. And that, at least so far, has not even been under discussion in terms of artificial intelligence. Artificial intuition, I've never heard that phrase, and I've only just said it for the first time. Now, I would say, just to skip ahead 1,000 years,
Yeah,
since everything is alive and everything is consciousness, there's no reason that a quote computer couldn't have intuition. There's no reason that a system based on silicon and copper
zeros and
wires, or even
ones.
better would be photonics.
Hmm.
There's no reason that couldn't have enough complexity that the divine would breathe itself into and through that vehicle. Now, a human brain, it's not the source of consciousness, let's be very clear, but it
Hmm.
has the requisite complexity for the cosmic consciousness to kind of flow through and express through. So computers, which wouldn't
Okay,
probably
wait
be
a minute,
called computers at that point.
wait a minute, because there's more. We're not even getting to the whole
Okay.
thing I thought we were going to talk about, but that's okay. Um, the brain has the requisite complexity for that cosmic consciousness to come through it. Don't just run, don't just run on. Don't continue on. Just please stop with that for a minute and talk to that. Speak to that.
Okay, very good. Well, that's the thing when you're in a flow, you just keep flowing. It isn't that I was
I know,
gonna
and I'm here to interrupt you.
run away. See, we're having fun. Isn't this cool?
Oh, so much fun.
Well, truth be told, I've never said those words before, and they're very
Mhm.
satisfying. Um, and it's really important in terms of understanding the human vehicle and also understanding our place as spiritual beings, let's say, in relation to the world. So, um, as Nisargadatta said, I'm not my mind, I'm not my body, I'm not all these things. At the same time, in oneness, of course, the body and the mind are part of what we are, but we just sort of get the perspective more aligned. So we're not limited to the brain's capacities, but the brain helps us to express our infinite genius. And if we know ourselves as infinite,
Hmm.
and infinitely intelligent, and therefore know ourselves as the source of genius,
Hmm.
we have a different relationship with the brain. We have a different relationship with the body. And guess what? Healing, bringing healing back in, it's the
Uh-huh.
reorientation from unreality to reality. When we know what's what, the body heals, the mind heals. As again, Nisargadatta said, I sound like an acolyte, but he keeps coming up today. He said, you get smarter with awakening. It's true. It's true
Mm.
because your ability to, let's say, think um, transcends the local mind, and thinking happens now within supreme mind. Maybe well, let's see. Sri Aurobindo would say the supramind.
Hmm.
In
Hmm.
any event, there are levels of mind beyond what we have historically thought of as the human mind that we have direct, immediate, unfettered access to.
Hmm.
And we just need a better understanding of what we are in order to use what we are, or at least what
Yeah,
we have.
yeah. In order to really receive it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the thing that
So
I
it
had,
turns out when you know that your sourcing
Mhm.
is actually quite easy and natural.
It is, and it is, and that's what I'm so aware of is how much more, instead of that being the the oddity in my day, when it's not, that's the oddity. When I've gone
Mhm.
into judgment about the situation or about myself or about somebody else, okay, that stops. That just okay. I don't feel that flow. I don't feel that love. I don't feel that vibration of unconditional love. And so, oh,
Yeah.
but I do want to feel that. So let me open again to how natural it is to express source, to live that. So the
And
thing
the
that
living of that
yeah,
is love. The living of
exactly.
that is love.
Yes.
I had an experience recently. I'm just going to share a little story here of trekking to the source of the Ganges
Hmm.
at a glacier called Gomukh, and or at least where the Gangotri Glacier melts in and the river emerges. That's called Gomukh. And until that point, I was still in some sense seeking, even if I knew in an embodied way that I'm source, there was still some
Hmm.
vestige of the seeker. And I saw that very clearly when at the source I sort of melted into the ground and surrendered and prostrated and showed great reverence for um, Gangama. And thereafter, I had something of a life crisis. I realized now, now that I'm no longer seeking, not even like a tiny bit,
Hmm.
what is life? And I realized it is the expression of love. And it actually always has been.
Hmm.
But the seeking process is so foreground that yeah, maybe it doesn't seem like it's all about the love. So for me, it was all about truth and what's real.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and that's still the case, but truth and love, it's like wisdom and compassion. They really go together.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
bird, which has the wings of wisdom and compassion, like it doesn't fly if it only has compassion or if it only has wisdom. And love without truth doesn't work, and truth without love is
Hmm. Isn't really love.
equally. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that for me, that I speak about those two, truth and love, it almost as being two sides of the same coin, and you can't really separate them. Yeah. So the piece we're ready, getting ready to come to a close, but I'm not ready to come to a close at all. And I just want to give voice to that which I wanted to speak about, was about, which is something you've written on so much about the enlightenment of money. And we
Hmm.
can't go into that because we don't have time today. But would you come back and we can
Yeah,
do an episode around that? Because there's
of
so
course.
much that you are thinking about and chewing on and bringing through, and I would love to. I don't want to do that in, 2 or 3 minutes or even 5 minutes. I'd really like to have some time with that.
You're on.
Good. Okay. How can people find out more about you and, what you're up to, what you're writing next, all of that?
Well, I have been in semi-seclusion for going on 3 years while writing a book called Beyond Every Teaching, which has been online the whole time in various draft forms, and now it's quite refined, and I'm just working on the introduction chapter, and then the book will be published. So one could go to beyondeveryteaching.com
Hmm.
to get a gist of some of these um, I'd say ideas, but it's so much more than ideas that we've been
Hmm.
exploring. And my main website is jeffvanderclute.com. That's a little trickier to spell, but I trust it is actually similar to it's how it sounds, Vanderclute.
And
And
it will be in the show.
that is good, good. That is like the kind of base camp for everything. And one can
Hmm.
access Beyond Every Teaching and root meanings and various articles, including the Enlightenment of Money articles. And I'm also available to have conversations and sessions and that sort of thing. Uh, I'm pretty much an open book, but I've been under the radar for a while.
Well, Jeff, I'm so glad that you've allowed the non-radar radar to find you and to come and be with me today and to be with us today. I really
Mhm.
appreciate just the way that you are in the world. I was going to use the word generous, but it's not even that. It's like that feels like it brings it down. It just feels like the way you are and the way what you bring to your moments in conversation are really rich and deep, and I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's been a total joy. And I want to say it's just the joy of yes.
It's just the joy
That's
of
what this
yes.
is.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And I want to
You're
thank
welcome.
our audience, our listeners, our viewers for being with us here today at Wisdom Talk Radio. Please do join us here regularly for more wisdom, discovery, and illumination. And if you've enjoyed this today, please leave us a review because, that's what helps other people discover this kind of transformative experience, really. And, We want to see that because we're here about what's happening in the world and changing the world and really people accessing their own unique innate wisdom. And for more about you thriving with your own personal quantum connection, take the quantum connection quiz today, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us here at Wisdom Talk Radio. We wish you well in your conscious explorations. For more information and to join in the conversation, our website is wisdomtalkradio.com or at Wisdom Talk Radio on Facebook.